Hey folks, I'm totally not named Dan, though you can call me that if you want. However, I'm fairly sure that since I've been sharing this video around a little more than usual, especially in the UniVersus community where I do use my true name, some of you will in fact know that name. And if that is the case, please don't use it here, not for my sake, but for the sake of others who watch, just because some of them enjoy the mystery. That said, what we're here for today is to look at this absolutely absurd deck that I recently took to Nationals. This All Might True Form, which nobody thought had a chance from the character, because frankly, in most cases, this character has been awful. When I first tried him out, he was busted beyond belief, and I will link you down below to Tamarin Cardwell's video of when I tried that out on his stream, because the original way the wording was interpreted implied that you could get double this character's abilities by stacking two of them. That has long since been disallowed via what they claimed was a ruling clarification. I would call it errata, but either way, whichever one you want to call it, that didn't work, and I then spent the entire life of the game up till now working out how to make this character viable again. And today, I finally figured it out, to the point where people have been hounding me for this deck list all week. Well, you know, if you'd played your matches with honor and not kept me out of top 8, you'd have had the list right then and there, wouldn't you? But let's move on over and we'll look at it now anyway. Here we go. So first up, obviously, we have All Might the character, or All Might True Form as they call him, even though he's not really All Might's true form. 730. So great stats, but loses 3 health at the start of every turn. Does mean that if he ends up going second, he still has 27 health and a bunch of good mid blocks when the opponent starts their attack turn. So he does always get his attack turn. So at least the health does that for him. It also can't kill him, that health loss, which has been noteworthy in a couple games. Then he has first form once per game. You place an All Might from your hand on top of this character so that he can become that All Might, as I was talking about a second ago. That's useless now, because he doesn't get to keep his own abilities. And if you want to play that All Might, you just play that All Might. There are some very, very, very specific situations where you might want to do this, but given that the deck isn't built around it, really, you just do it as a joke sometimes. It's not a thing you do if you seriously want to win. The thing that you actually play this character for is enhance discard 1 All Might card, your attack gets +3 damage, draw 1 card. So that's all of these additional All Mights, and then all of these additional All Mights too. We run 18 main deck All Mights because every single one of them is basically free cycle through your deck and free damage. They are just so, well, yeah, free. And it means you see more of the cards you actually want to see, like, say, your attacks. The first of which is this Crow and Frog takedown. Now, many games I have seen 2 or 3 Crow and Frog takedowns in a turn. One, I saw 4. Even one Crow and Frog takedown is great because it's a 8 damage attack that doesn't count towards progressive difficulty. But when you throw 3 8 damage attacks that don't count towards progressive difficulty, and then still have attacks in hand, that's just insane. And that's not even the most free card we have, because Invisible Infiltration is on a 4. It gets +1 damage for every 4 foundations your rival has, which, you know, not that big a deal, but it's nice because it usually means it's going to be a 6 damage attack and therefore a 9 with the character's ability. Then it has enhanced remove a foundation from either player's stage. After this attack resolves, the owner builds it back face up. So basically, you unflip one of your foundations, you uncommit one of your foundations. You never remove your opponent's stuff. You just remove your own to make sure that you've always got stuff to commit to pass checks. And trust me, we have some insane stuff to use to pass checks. Then, speaking of free attacks, we got Hardened Frenzy. Hardened Frenzy is only free if your opponent blocks it, but given that it's a 7 damage attack, they're taking a lot of damage if they don't block it. And it's still only a 4 difficulty. It also becomes a 5 speed to make it hard for them to block it if you build a card this turn, say via that invisible infiltration we talked about a second ago. That's a little specific. It rarely happens just because you tend to want to play invisible infiltration near the end of the turn, and hardened frenzy sort of beginning to middle. But when it does happen, it's real nice. And if they block the one hardened frenzy, that sets off all the others, because remember, we're cycling through 18 cards of our deck to see a lot of the same things over and over and over. Then we have Airstream Driver, which is another block punish. This discards a card from your rival's card pool, so it makes their blocks easier, but it also gains 3 speed, putting it to 6, meaning that there's no way they're going to be able to block without committing stuff. And it also gets plus 3 damage, putting it to 9 and then 12 with your character's ability. So basically, anytime they block you, you punish them with half their health. It's real good. It is on a 5. It is realistically, at the time you use it, liable to be on a 6. But remember, we're running 18 characters main deck, every single one of which is a 6 check. So it's quite likely that you will check that. And in addition to all of that, we have Enhanced Discard 1 Momentum, Seal 1 Rival Asset or Foundation. So if there's a problem card on your opponent's side of the field, this just says no to it. Admittedly, it's not that common that that comes up, especially as that requires you to go to turn 3, which is not something you want to do. If your opponent runs a particularly good deck, it will happen, but generally speaking, we don't want to do that. That's just a nice little bonus ability. The main one is the 12 damage that's on a 6 speed, almost guaranteed to go through. Then we have the most expensive card in the deck, the One for All Full Cowling 5% Strike. In early builds, I was running 4 of this. You don't need to run 4 of this, because there are other ways to discard your hand and get a new one, which we'll talk about in a little bit. What this is, though, is it's a 4 high, a 6, or 9, as it becomes, and, well, it's a punch, which is useful for a few things, including interacting with the other All Mights if you ever play them. But the more important one is, yeah, it refreshes your hand if you need it to, or if you use it early on in the turn, you can use this to either force a block to power up your Airstream Driver, or to commit your rival's character. Sadly, their choice, but even so, in roughly 40% of matchups, that's going to be an absolute godsend. And in the rest, it's still a good attack. Whereas other commit your rival's character cards, like, say, Blood Curdle, do pretty much nothing outside of their dedicated matchups. So while they're fantastic in 40%, they're pretty much dead in 60% in a way that this just isn't. It's a real good card. And that's our 18 attacks. Then we have Foundations. This is the big one. This is Advice for Winners. Advice for Winners is an absolute nightmare to get hold of, because if you ask anyone if they have Advice for Winners, they will just say, just check better, lol. Hence why that's on the card now. It is incredibly hard to trade for because of that, because no one will actually take your request for the card seriously. But if you can get hold of it, it is an amazing card. It is response flip. After you check a printed 3 to play a card, recheck. So any of the attacks in this deck, this just flips, you check again. There is a rule that specifically says you can only have 1 recheck per check. So if you check 2 attacks in a row, you're kind of screwed. But realistically, that's not very likely to happen. And if it does, you'll still have a face-down Foundation you can commit. More likely, you're going to check one of the characters or Foundations, which means you just gained, on average, like 2.6 to your check by flipping this, because there are more characters in the deck than Foundations, which is just great. But even if you check the 5 and you need a 6, you then have this face down ready to commit at the time you do it, because you flip this after you make the check before you commit to pass the check. So the timing on this just could not be better. And bear in mind, if you do this, you check a 5, you still need a 6 to push through an invisible infiltration. Well, you've just flipped this, you've committed this for the invisible infiltration, you then use the invisible infiltration, remove this comes back face up and ready at the end of the attack, and you can just do it all over again. The interactions with this card in this deck are absolutely absurd. Just straight up busted. It is not okay, and that's a huge part of why this deck works. But if you don't draw the Advice for Winners, we do always have Destined for Mainstream Success as the alternative. Destined for Mainstream Success is slightly less ideal timing. It's not quite as easy to recur, but you can still recur it a bit. It has enhance, flip, name a card type, then reveal the top card of your deck. If the card matches the name type, add it to your hand. So that's, you say attack, either you flip over the top card of your deck and see, say, a foundation or a character, and you know you're going to check a 5 or a 6, or you flip over an attack, you remove the attack from the top of your deck, and now you have another attack to play. So this actually helps you see more invisible infiltrations to then recur the foundation. It's a self-perpetuating combo like that. This is real nice. And in an absolute pinch, you can use it to pick up a character or something if you really need a block, or you really need that +3 damage. But in general, you just want to use it to get attacks off the top of your deck. That's the real reason to run it. Then we have Celebrity Status. This is specifically for if you end your second turn without killing. You can then use this to put a card on top of your deck for your momentum. As long as you remember where your momentum is, that's literally any of the attacks in this deck you can choose from. Then once that's on top of your deck, you discard an All Might, you +3 damage your attack, or you don't if it's your opponent's attack, but you still get to discard the All Might. And you get to pick up a card, which will be the card you put on top. So you can, using this and an All Might in hand, just pick up any attack from your momentum. I mean, any card from your momentum, but in this deck, other cards aren't going to be there. So yeah, Celebrity Status is crazy, and it's extra crazy with this one other foundation that we only run 2 copies of. You won't see this too often, but bear in mind we cycle through our deck a lot, you will still see it, and you'll see it alongside that 5% strike, because these two interact quite nicely. Sadly, this 5% strike is the only thing that Pull No Punches interacts with in the deck. I have been considering taking it out a little bit, but it's been good when it's shown up. This is, you can destroy Pull No Punches, so you can't recur it, sadly. Add your 5% strike to your momentum during your turn, so it gets it out the card pool, so that you don't have it there for progressive difficulty. And then now that it's in your momentum, you can use that Celebrity Status to add it to the top of your deck, and then you use your All Might to draw in, so you can just recur this one for all full cowling 5% strike. And then you can discard your hand, draw 3 cards multiple times in a turn. It's a fairly niche combo, but when it happens, it's real cool, and just, that's a thing to be aware of here. The final thing we have, though, the thing that puts us over the 50 card limit that I usually stick to, is 2 copies of the Price for Peace. Now, this has a Deadlock Enhance on it. You will never see that Deadlock Enhance. This deck kills too quickly or dies too quickly for that to ever be relevant. And I mean, even if it doesn't, it puts so much pressure on the opponent that they're not going to be focusing on building. They're going to be focusing on doing everything they can to either kill you or stop you. Yeah, you're never going to see that Deadlock Enhance. But the form, discard your hand, draw up to your printed hand size. If this is not your first form, at the start of the end phase, lose the game, is very relevant. So you got to be very careful when you use this, because it does lose you the game, but it does also win you the game in some situations. First off, they've reduced the number of mulligans you can usually take as first player. I say usually take because you can still take 2 mulligans under the right situation, but it has to be you draw no foundations in your second hand. So that's a lot less likely than it used to be, but it's still something that might happen with this deck because we run a total of 14 foundations. That is not many. And we'll go over that rule properly in the next video, but the main thing is we don't need to run many because of how much we can recur them. We only need to see, realistically, maybe 2 to play out a full hand of attacks. However, if you have a little extra, you can always use the Price for Peace to get a second hand and go again. And against former UK champion Mike Hardiman, I saw both of these and cycled my deck twice in one turn. And just played out 3 hands of attacks, and even his insane block recursion could not stop that. So this can win you the game as well as lose you the game. But it is also, in the early game, on your first turn, an extra mulligan if you don't see the foundations. So it fulfills 2 different duties, and yeah, sure, in other situations it's kind of a dead card, but that's why we only run 2 of it, right? It's still real darn good. And so, that's all the cards in the deck. Here is the deck list for you. In terms of playing this, it is a very simple deck. It helps a lot if you card count with it, because then you can know in certain situations whether you're going to have to commit or not for blocks and for attacks. And say you're facing a Dabby, they blow up your entire board. You need to know if you can keep blocking for the rest of that turn, or if you have to actually not blow up your board and give them the +8 damage and throw, which you really don't want to give them if you don't have to. And ultimately, if you do have enough characters and foundations in your deck, you can just let them blow up your board and then next turn backswing them on no foundations. That is a viable strategy that has won me games. But it's about knowing your deck, and because of that, maybe it's best this didn't go to Vegas, where card counting is kind of frowned upon. But even so, I mean, aside from that, this is a pretty brain dead deck, to be honest. Yeah, you gotta know your lineup of attacks slightly, but I mean, most of them say it themselves. Crow and Frog always wants to go first if it can. Airstream Drivers whenever your opponent has cards in pool. Hardened Frenzy is your nice cheap one. And then if you're running out of stuff, you go for the Invisible Infiltration so that you can ready all your stuff. It's very simple. Just mulligan aggressively to make sure you get 2 or 3 foundations. And other than that, just play the deck as the deck tells you to play it. Unless your opponent makes you make decisions, there are not a lot to be made here. And yet, the fact that you can consistently throw out 6+ attacks with 7+ damage each means this melts meta decks. Jiro dies. Tokoyami dies. Mineta, okay, that's a hard one. You need to actually see a good number of foundations for Mineta. But even then, you see the right number of foundations, Mineta just dies. Because you can power through all those speed reduction abilities, all the blocks. There ain't a thing you can do once you start throwing attack 4+. Haven't tried this against Kirishima, but I can imagine that Kirishima doesn't do a vast amount against it either, just on the grounds that Kirishima's designed to block a couple and then stop one big attack, whereas this is a whole load of sort of fairly large attacks, but they're all reasonably hard to block and only get harder when punishing you for blocking that first time. And yeah, I just don't think Kirishima's meant to deal with that many. The 2 things that did beat this were, ironically, my old Ochako deck, the first deck I did a video on for my hero, just because it has so many high zone attacks and this has so few high blocks. And all the high blocks it does have are on foundations that it actually wants to play. And the other one was Mike Hardiman's Momo, just because, well, it loops so many blocks in a turn, it's ridiculous. And yeah, sure, I beat him 1 game out of 3. And it was a very close, hard-fought match in every single game. But even so, I didn't come out on top. I possibly could have come out on top if things went slightly differently, but it was a hell of a matchup, and it's one of the hardest matchups I've played with this deck. I think that's it for this, other than to say my one other piece of advice for winners. Because yeah, sure, just check better lol is actually very fitting for the card, because that's what the card makes you do. But the thing that actually seemed to win a lot in this latest event was just get to round 5 with 4 wins, and then say, no, I don't want to play. Because if you don't play and your opponent agrees to a draw, both of you get slightly more points than somebody who's won 4 games, and so it doesn't matter how great a person's tiebreakers are, they're stopped from being in top 8. So yeah, the best advice for winners is in fact don't play the game, because you can't lose if you don't play. Which is just absurd. I am very annoyed that I spent ages building this, joined an event to try and prove my worth, actually genuinely did, proved that I was a fantastic deck builder, that I managed to make something like this. And then it just didn't matter because I lost to people who didn't play the game. Intentional draws are stupid. But hey, it did give me the chance to make this video for you, and I hope you've enjoyed seeing this deck, because it is a lot of fun. It is also a lot of money though, so I mean, play it online, virtually maybe. If you want to play it in person, make sure that you're getting your money's worth, that you're playing some serious events with it. Because, I mean, these one for all full cowlings are 50 to 60 quid a piece. And we got price per piece is 20 to 30. Your Airstream drivers are like 15. Your Invisible Infiltrations are like 10. Your Crow and Frogs 15. Your Advice for Winners like 10. I don't even remember what all these All Mights go for. But funnily enough, the true form is 7p. So, yeah. It's a very expensive deck. It's not something that I expect everyone to build. and it is fun as a concept. To play, it's more of just a generic aggro. I don't know, that's all I've got to say on this deck for now, but if you want more on this and other event-topping decks, please check out my new buddy Travis from Oh Mr. Matsu. I'll link him down in the description down below. And if you want more of my wacky ideas, stay tuned. There'll be plenty more on this here channel. See you next time, everyone. Bye.